revelations? Are there some stories that even shocked you?
Well, I think one of the big stories that we were able to document in some detail was the whole scope of CIA activities, similar to what the CIA did in Chile, and which was documented by the Senate Select Committee, was the whole covert action program in Jamaica in between 1976 and 1980. And we did a great deal of research into that, and we discovered in many ways a very similar program, almost a classic model that was followed along the lines of what they did in Chile, including three major categories: military, paramilitary activity, the use of propaganda in the media, and the third one, which was economic warfare, using the multilateral organizations, the
Yo, check this out. This is Wayne Wonder, representing for Warieka LTV. You see the vision, don't it? See the vision. Warieka LTV. Keep it locked.
No, I'm gonna tell you. We, us as bloggers, these are the issues that we need to address. You understand what I said? You see? Set the path for the youth. Share, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned to the channel. I don't know all this. Yes, sir. Greetings once again in the mighty name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, and all things that's good and right amongst us. No. Welcome all viewers and subscribers. Viewers, if you like the content, subscribe and make way to grow the channel. You don't know. You know, see it. Now, tonight I'm on have some documents I'm gonna put together. We want to show the item where represent our history. You know, see it, and them information here come from a very high standpoint as far as where black people or local people is concerned. You know, see it. I dice up the documentary, them put them together, so that hopefully them might you might see some correlations between the information, how things add up and how things make sense. More, you know, so throughout all of this, the main people that would control the food sector, food distribution and importation was the Chinese. The Chinese were also communists, like, and they still are communists like the Cubans. See, the fight that Jamaica got at the time was because of their connection with the Cuban communists. See, yet still the Chinese take bribe from the American source, the CIA source, as it's going to be outlined in the documentary. It might not be outlined that the Chinese in particular took bribe, but from my experience, they are the ones who started food distribution, and they are the ones who dumped the basic commodities, the basic things that people need in a dump. You understand? While them could have sell it back to the Jamaican public still, you know, but they kept it until it was spoiled and threw them away. You know, see, them who out of date and was no longer good. See, I cannot understand the Chinese motive in all of that and in all of this. It's still confusing to me to this day. You know, see, why I have a sharp eye on them. See, it also goes to the fact to say Cuba is right next door to us, and Cuba is communism, and now that they are in the prime of their power, so-called power, they have bat an eye at Cuba to try and help out Cuba in any way, like how they seem to be going around the world and helping out everybody else. You understand me? It doesn't sit well with me. It's confusing. I don't trust the Chinese. I just can't. You understand? I think they are hustlers. Anyway, we have another program, another document where me and two brethren do so long a reason about them. Well, me and one brethren, another brethren is dead, but you don't know. Me will play that one on the phone later on. But for the video here, more sit back and relax. Michael Manley's argument is gonna be in two parts. So the reporter and the CIA officer, them argument are gonna be in a two part, one after the other. Scene. So essentially you're gonna have four clips of the same people that might have a conversation. You understand me? So stay tuned and watch what I go on. You don't know. Give thanks, share, like, and subscribe in Rastafari name. Blessed love, Rastafari.
Tell us a little bit about Lewis Wolf and his journalistic publications. Who is Lewis and what has he been doing over the years, and why is the government so outraged by him?
Well, his background is it's thoroughly legitimate, standard, if you will, journalism. He was assigned for a couple of years in Manchester, writing for a couple of prominent news organizations.
Manchester, England?
Yes, Manchester, England. And eventually made his way through London back to the United States, where he gravitated to scrutiny of the CIA and the intelligence community, watching the revelations of the Church Committee, information that he had come across in his research, some of which he had published as part of news stories previously, other parts of which he was not permitted to publish by the nature of the press establishment. And so he put together with Bill Shapp and Ellen Ray the Covert Action Information Bulletin, whose function was to focus on the intelligence organizations of the United States and discuss and expose in a perfectly legitimate way the covert action activities of the CIA principally, as well as the other intelligence organizations. I believe they formed that in about 1976 and have been in Washington since, publishing stories of true stories. Their quality, their standards of journalism are exceedingly high. That bulletin is distributed in the State Department, and it's sold out the first morning that it's put on the stands in the State Department newsstands. They also publish in that bulletin the names of CIA agents and where they are now, as they're assigned and reassigned about the world. I believe that in very recent months they have ceased the policy of publishing names because the controversy is so hot, and they would just as soon. And also, it's never been their intention to break the law. They've made that clear from the outset. Bill Shapp is the brother. He is a highly competent attorney and is the brother of a top sportscaster in New York City. He is a very articulate man himself and has testified to the Senate many times against the names of Agents Bill, for example, and defending what he and Lew Wolf are doing. And after his testimony, many times senators have come up and shaken his hand and said, I disagree with you, but you certainly make your case for the legitimacy of what you're doing very well.
Let's take a look at some of the things which Lewis Wolf had to say, and we'll let you comment ever so often on this, okay?
What, in the years that you've been publishing it, do you think are some of your most significant revelations? Are there some stories that even shocked you?
Well, I think one of the big stories that we were able to document in some detail was the whole scope of CIA activities similar to what the CIA did in Chile, and which was documented by the Senate Select Committee, was the whole covert action program in Jamaica in between 1976 and 1980. And we did a great deal of research into that, and we discovered in many ways a very similar program, almost a classic model that was followed along the lines of what they did in Chile, including three major categories: military, paramilitary activity, the use of propaganda in the media, and the third one, which was economic warfare, using the multilateral organizations, the International Monetary Fund and others, to withhold loans which had been promised to the Jamaican government. This is one example.
What are a couple more of the details of that? You mentioned those first two examples of actual paramilitary activity the CIA was involved in Jamaica.
There was a fire, for example, that took place in Jamaica of an old people's home. I think 150 old and infirmed women, many of them blind, were living in this home, and as it turned out, the place burned down in the space of about 8 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes. It was discovered that the phone wires had been cut and that the exits had all been blocked. Even those who could see their way out could not get out. And that the means by which the fire was set was the use of a petroleum jelly, which was unavailable in Jamaica. This was one indication, among others, that there was outside help. Why would the CIA, you might ask, why would the CIA want to murder 150 old women? It was because it was an effort, part of a very large-scale effort to discredit the government in Jamaica, which was at the time headed by Michael Manley, the Prime Minister. There were images produced.
Funny Caribbean, usually tranquil island.
I think that one has to distinguish two clear things. Firstly, the city of Kingston, like many cities with problems of unemployment and poverty, has always had a tendency to violence of the kind that you would find certainly in many North American cities, set and off balance and that sort of thing. And definitely, therefore, there is a political element has crept into the situation.
Well, why would the opposition party, I presume you're referring to the opposition party, there are only two parties running.
Yes.
And why would they go to tactics of that nature? Don't you think it would harm them more than do them any good?
Well, I think that the whole thing, you see, has been, I think, rather cleverly managed, in that our political tradition has always involved, again, a very marginal element of violence, although it used to be in the old days just fist fights and the occasional brick and things of that sort. And recently what has happened, as I say, is to introduce into this tendency a certain element that I think is borrowed from the underworld. And I think this has been done by certain elements quite deliberately to cause a certain panic in the society, to give the impression that the government's not really in control. And of course, sometimes, as happens when the violence starts on one side, you get reaction from the other side. So in the end, you get a confused situation in which the average citizen may think, well, it just seems to be both of them at each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that one gets a cloak under which really to work the plan.
In driving around Kingston, we noticed a lot of signs saying Castro go home or CIA go home. And there seems to be a Cuban-American involvement in this. Now, how much influence do these countries have on this political scene at this time?
They don't, neither country has any general influence in the Jamaican political scene. What has happened is that because the Jamaican government has had a policy of friendly relations with Cuba, very like the Canadian government, who have always had a tradition of friendly relations with Cuba. We have been charged by the more right-wing extremist elements of our opposition with all sorts of propaganda in what has really been an orchestrated communist smear tactic. Very unfair. We are not communists. We are very much a sort of social democrat group, democratic socialist group. And these smear tactics have been worked, which accounts for the Castro go home kind of slogan. And then, of course, there has been a certain tension in certain elements in the United States of America about our relations with Cuba, as indeed there is tension in America towards Canada's attitude towards Cuba, as you know, is not approved of by the State Department. And so somehow all this has got escalated into a series of charges and countercharges.
Well, is there some financial involvement, say, from the Cubans to your government and from the Americans to the opposition?
No. Well, I can't speak for the Americans with the opposition. There's no financial involvement between the Cubans and us, none whatsoever.
The Cubans are investing here, though. They're like building a school.
Well, that really was a gesture of solidarity. It's very much a, you know, there's a new thing emerging in the Third World, where Third World countries often do things for each other on a cooperative basis in a manner that I think is quite new in world experience and very interesting. We, for instance, are helping them with no charge at all with some things that we think we are quite good at, like tourism. We send teams for no charge to help them organize their new tourist industry. And also we have been one of the countries here who has, I think, shown courage in standing up for Cuba's right to be accepted as a normal part of the Latin American family. And I think that they appreciate this, and as a gesture of solidarity, offered to build this school as a sort of reciprocal gesture. which of course became a subject of propaganda.
Yes, why would they be so touchy, though, for people to take pictures of a project like that?
Well, you see, because they have been, the fact that they're building this school has been the subject of a lot of unfavorable comment in the American press. Right-wing elements in Jamaica have been very nasty about it. And thereafter...
...of Michael Manley in the media, in the Daily Gleaner, which was the newspaper which the United States, through the CIA, helped to support. And there is a good deal of evidence of that. There were images of Michael Manley showing a death mask. I mean, it was his face which had been somehow made to look like a death mask, although it was pretending to be a photograph of him. And there were many ways to try and discredit him. This is very, very similar, in fact, to what the CIA did to try and discredit Salvador Allende in Chile. If you remember, Richard Nixon instructed the CIA in a meeting which was in 1970 in the White House, and there was a document in the Senate report which is reprinted, and he said, "Make the economy scream." Those were his words. And that's, of course, what the CIA proceeded to do in Chile, and that's what they also did in Jamaica.
They also had furnished a lot of munitions and assistance to the terrorist squads that were going around killing people in the cities and also in the countryside in Jamaica as well.
That's correct.
Well, John, you had a trip down to Jamaica, and you saw a lot of these things about Jamaica with your own eyes, right?
Yes, indeed. A very moving, a very interesting trip to me to see a target country at a time in the height of a CIA operation when I was completely outside. So there's no way that I could see the problem that journalists have always had when the U.S. government was targeting on a country in a situation, trying to destabilize it, overthrow, or manipulate the elections or whatever, of trying to figure out what's going on when you don't have access to all of the flow of cables and the discussions in National Security Council meetings and whatnot for the planning. I observed that from published information, the CIA station there was quite large for that size of a country. It was huge, in fact. It was bigger than any station I knew of in Africa, although Jamaica was a fairly small island with 2 million people. That's typical of when the CIA has got a big operation going in a place. They beef up the station and beef up the offices back stateside. The tone and flow of articles in the Gleaner was, of course, as Lou says, definitely a chapter out of Chile or a chapter out of the Angolan operation. Every indication of a massive CIA operation going to destabilize the government, to make the economy scream, and in that case, I would say that probably someone got promoted for that one, probably several people.
Because Manley was run out of office.
Because it worked.
By a legitimate election.
Without a scandal, without an assassination, without the things that have caused the CIA so much grief, Manley, a champion of social democracy, of giving the people a piece of the pie, was thrown out of office, and an arch-capitalist was put in office. And again, there was minimal adverse publicity. Lew Wolf and the others were studying the situation and did publish about what was going on, but it was not published in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and the big television networks didn't do studies on it, primarily because even if the journalists of the big organs knew what was happening and might have wanted to, they really just, because of the secrecy, couldn't get the truth about what the United States was doing. One interesting thing was that the effectiveness of the liars in our government, you know, the duplicity. When we formed the CIA, we committed our leaders to having two policies, as Lou says, the rhetoric, the public statements, and the truth about what United States policy is. So an interesting measure of presidents is how effectively they lie. Interesting discussions that occur inside the CIA is about lying. Would you lie? You know, you're the DDO and you're going to testify to the Senate, and it's serious discussions. Are you going to lie? Because if you do, it's perjury, and there's a chance you could go to jail. And yet, you know, the organization expects you to lie. President Carter was one of the most effective liars I have ever watched on television and through the media. As a poker player, man, I would never go up against that man. He could look at that camera and say things that obviously he knew were completely and totally false. And I would study his expression, and I could detect nothing except occasionally a little wisp of a smile that wasn't consistent with what he was saying, like he thought it was funny. But one of his more classic
tick, actually.
Yeah, well, the smile that I was referring to wasn't that. It was just a kind of like he was repressing a grin, like he thought it was funny. How he rationalized these things, I don't know. But one of his most conspicuous lies was when he sat down with Manley just a few weeks before the elections in Washington and told him face to face that the CIA, don't have the CIA doing anything to destabilize you or your government. We have no such program going, when obviously he did. And he pulled it off to the point where even Manley was troubled. Very effective liar.
After all, you know, I have a very unfortunate experience with the CIA, as I'm sure you know. And they have had their own embassy. Yes, in recent times, for example, their embassy has been attacked twice here by extremist right-wing elements. And I think that this tends to make them very sensitive and therefore touchy, as you said, touchy about the situation and very careful. And, you know, with the state of emergency on, they would be particularly, I think, cautious at this time.
What about Canadian investment in Jamaica? I understand it's about $300 million. And with the swing toward socialism or perhaps eventual nationalization, what sort of situation are they in now? Is it a precarious thing for them, or?
No, we have very good relations with Canadian capital generally in Jamaica. We've found them to be good corporate citizens. The banks, by and large, cooperate with the government very well. We really haven't had any problems in that. And with one of your major investments, of course, which is the Alcan operation. Here, we, as you know, are in the middle of a major revision of our whole bauxite strategy, because this is our critical basic resource. It's the one really big thing we have going for us, apart from tourism. We have our people, we have bauxite, and we have tourism, and we have sugar. And our negotiations with the Alcan group to work out a new relationship between them and the Jamaica government are going very well, and I think are getting quite near to an amicable settlement.
Mm-hmm. One of the, I should have asked this along with the first part of the interview, but one of the reasons I got for the, if I may call it terror and unrest here, was the unemployment factor. And the fires and things that have been going on in a very poor area. Do you feel that perhaps it's because of these poor people and the unemployment rate that has...
No, absolutely not. Absolutely nothing to do with it at all. What that does is to create a tense situation. But the actual terrorism is manipulated. And it really is very easy to demonstrate this, because some of the problems that we have had have been small groups of gunmen who operate from quite expensive Toyota cars. Now, when you own a Toyota car and the three of you work from that, I don't think you really are poor. But what the poverty does, as I say, is to create an atmosphere that can be exploited and manipulated by anybody who is ruthless. Where the unemployment is concerned, for example, with all the tremendous world inflationary pressures that have hit a little country like Jamaica so hard, and now with the economic recession that hit us so hard late last year and earlier this year, in spite of all that, we've actually reduced unemployment slightly. Not as much as we would have liked, but we have actually pulled it down a couple of percentage points.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that these poor people then in Trenchtown and other areas are being used?
Oh yes, as far as this is concerned, there's no question that they're being used. Mm-hmm. No question at all.
In regard to terrorism on the island then?
Well, it's not really terrorism on the island.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. What about the tourist situation?
No.
Is it safe for tourists?
Absolutely safe. It is, although it's a very unpleasant situation, it is our good luck, in a sense, that all of this has been restricted to the urban ghetto area, an area where we are pushing massive housing developments right now within our very limited resources. We really are working very hard and building thousands of houses a year now for the poor. But it's a huge backlog to overtake. Can't be overtaken in 3-5 years. It's a huge task. But the violence itself and the manipulation of it is very much a phenomenon in the western part of Lower Kingston, where the bad concentration of poverty is.
The emergency powers, politically, will it help you or harm you?
Well, we haven't really thought of it in those terms, because basically our objective in the state of emergency is to do with the state of the society, its confidence, and its economy. The violence was beginning to break the confidence of the Jamaican people in their own society, and therefore having a very bad effect on the economy. And we are determined by the use of this admittedly extreme measure to create an atmosphere in which the Jamaican people begin to recover their self-confidence in their society and begin, therefore, to act in a dynamic and buoyant way in their economy. That's really what our objectives are.
Is it working?
We think it's working very well. We're very pleased with the results.
What are your chances in the next election?
We'll win.
Are you sure about that?
Well, let me put it this way, to say that you're sure always sounds arrogant. What I really feel is that, we have done a tremendous amount for the poor, for the people, in spite of the pressures. We've got a very powerful organization. We've got very solid mass support. We're very strong among small farmers and groups of that sort up in the hinterland, actually the part of Jamaica the tourist doesn't get to see. And we feel that the people understand us and we understand the people.